Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we are going to be talking Unit 10 in Arizona with Craig Steele of Exclusive Pursuit Outfitters. We're also going to go over some of the Antelope options for the 2017 Arizona draw coming up here February 14th. Craig, how you doing?
I'm doing awesome, Jay. How you doing?
Oh, doing good. It was we've got several things to talk about here first. First is we just you were able to come up for a day and spend some time with Hunter and Dara and I up at the SCI convention. First and foremost, I would like to ask you what's your overall thoughts, never having been to that SCI convention? What'd you think?
It was dang sure a neat. I haven't been to a show in a while since I stopped doing a magazine, and I hadn't been to the SCIs like you said. But is I mean, predominantly, I don't know. It seemed like 50-60% of the booths were Africa, Europe. I seen a Poland. I mean, which is I guess part of Europe, but just it's amazing. How many different overseas hunting opportunities there is. And definitely, obviously the price point to get into that show is a lot more expensive than, say your ISE or, even the Western Hunting Expo. So it was pretty cool. It was a pretty good experience. You had your a lot of your name brands, Swarovski's eye, on your optics and so it was dang sure pretty neat to see all that. I mean, it's definitely a little bit older demographic. I think because because of the price point, maybe more guys looking for those overseas type hunts. Never seen so many giant high fence whitetail in my life. Um,
Yeah, some
they
of them looked like they were like red stags. They had points going
One said
everywhere.
618 or something like that. It was 618. It was like, I mean, after 300 inches, can you even? I mean, it was. I mean, they all blended in, of course, because I'm not into high fence stuff, and I mean, it was cool at first to look at them, and then as you walk by the like 5 or 6 booths that were that had all those whitetail, you're like, man, they all look the same to me. The one that stood out to me was the Fairchase, Kansas one with the 140 to 180 typicals, that you could tell weren't genetically engineered. But I mean, to each his own. That was just kind of the mounts were cool. There were some cool mounts at the show. It wasn't as busy as I thought it was going to be, but it was Thursday. It's funny, you get at the shows and you talk to a few people and, you eat lunch and then before you know it, it's over with, and like the day's gone.
Yeah, it goes by
And,
fast for sure.
and
My thoughts on SEI are kind of the same as yours. I think it's an amazing show. It's a giant show. It's the largest show that I go to as far as booths and numbers of booths and numbers of people. And all of the Africa stuff and all of the overseas stuff to me is mind blowing because what it does is it shows that there's people all over the world that are really passionate about hunting the game that's on their continent or in their country or in their state. And you see the professional hunters, the guides, the outfitters, and the hunters in general, they're over there talking about, a crocodile or a zebra or a leopard or stuff that, I've never even thought of hunting. But if I lived where they live, I would be just as fired up about, trying to, hunt those animals. And so I think it's easy. The first time I ever went there, I thought, oh, it's just Africa stuff, and it's just, Europe, and then
yeah,
I think, wait a minute, we're all fired up about mule deer and elk and antelope and coos deer and bighorn sheep. Well, that's because those animals live here on our continent. If I was over in a place where, tur and Spanish goats and whatever crazy stuff, what I think is crazy stuff, if that was the everyday animal, roe deer and red deer and stuff, then I would be into that. I would be phone scoping and showing my photos of, check out this red stag, check out this roe deer, this awesome buck. And so it's just different. I think for me, the only thing that I don't like about SCI is exactly what you're saying, and that is the high fence whitetail, genetically modified, we can get in, it's not even worth in this discussion whether it's hunting or not hunting. Slope. But to me, that is the only portion that I don't like. I don't like, the 300-400 inch whitetails, non-typicals, and they're behind a high fence. I've always had a problem with that mentality of, put something behind a high fence and then genetically modify and use steroids and inject your deer and this, that, and the other. I'm seeing some in Mexico. A lot of the flats ranches down by Hermosillo are going to this high fence, trapping 20 or 30 does and putting them in one pen with some big giant buck and then letting the does out. And I'm not a proponent of any of that. And I don't like that portion of SCI, but there's a lot of great stuff. SCI as an organization does probably more conservation work with dollars than than a lot of them all combined together. So while I think there's some things that I don't really like, they do a lot of good, and I think I've changed over the years to look at that and realize what a great deal SCI is for hunters across this world. And the other thing is, the first time I went to the SCI convention, I see a lot of guys with a lot of money and they're spending a lot of money, and I snubbed my nose and I looked down on that. And that's a whole nother conversation, but it comes back to just because someone is better off than me doesn't mean that they're a bad person, or that just because they are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, you know what I mean? And it's easy, I think, as a human to be like, oh, well, they're just rich. Well, I'm rich compared to someone else, and someone else is rich compared to me. And, there's this, I think there are some guys that go to these deals and they try and measure up and, flaunt what they've got, and that's their own issues. But, I've enjoyed going to the SCI convention over the years, and it's just something that I love going and seeing the passion of worldwide hunters that just love, whether it's Americans, going overseas to hunt animals they've never encountered. I think that's fantastic, and it was great to meet up with old friends, and it was a fun show.
Yeah, you're definitely like the mayor there.
Mayor, yeah, right.
No, the cool part about, all that other crap, as far as like, whether you're jealous of somebody that has more money than you or has this, that's typical. And then, the high fence stuff, pretty much you can see who that is, what that is. It is what it is. And I don't even worry about that stuff anymore. But as far as like the European stuff or, overseas stuff, that's, kind of the fair chase and the cultural stuff, it's interesting. I think, I always relay a lot of stuff to myself, to my dad, and, and the mentality that of we are the only person or only people that matter is really is really ignorant, and it's sometimes what we get stuck in. And like you said, if we were very blessed just to be born where we are, and it's amazing that when we see that, it's kind of like, man, who wants to hunt a crocodile, But when you really put it in perspective, if you were born there, you were raised there, that's their culture, and that's what they do. And if we were there, that's what we'd be doing. We're just lucky and blessed to be born here, and it's just amazing. So when you see it from that perspective, you get out of your ignorant way of thinking, and you're like, man, that's kind of cool. I've hunted with, we just got done hunting. I wasn't hunting with them, but I hunted with them before. Just got done hunting with 2 Polish guys that live over here in the United States, on predator hunts. And I hunted with a couple from New Zealand, and then I just got an email from a guy from Denmark. And the one thing that fascinates me about guys that are from overseas that come here to hunt, one animal, is, whereas a lot of guys in the United States, they want to kill as many as they can, as far as coyotes or bobcats or fox or whatever. Those guys, when they kill an animal, it's a celebration. It is a huge accomplishment to them. And it really, I was thinking about this the other night, it almost embarrasses me, because we're so a little bit spoiled. You know what I mean? To them, the guy that emailed me from Denmark, he's talking about a gray fox as a huge, trophy and accomplishment to him. And I mean, this last guy, he wanted all the skulls plus the furs. I mean, he was going to boil the skulls himself. I mean, they're grateful. You know what I mean? And I think sometimes because, and I'm just speaking for myself, I find myself not grateful. You know what I mean? I'm not
taken for granted.
For what I take it for granted. And, these guys are emailing me, and I'm like, and you kind of learn, it's cool. It is freaking cool to watch a guy actually get pumped because he kills a great fox. And whereas I grew up doing it, and to me, it's like, oh, it's a great fox. You know what I mean? And I think I have a crappy perspective sometimes. That's just being honest. So.
Well, I think that's a good point. Another thing I'd like to bring up is what a game last night. I know you've been a Patriots fan as long as I've ever known you. And you've caught a lot of flack for it, I got to be honest, but you've taken it sometimes well and sometimes not as well, and I understand both scenarios, but you're a fan, and I didn't really care. I don't like either team. It's not like I don't like them. I pull for the Cardinals, so I mean, it's like I didn't really care, but I tell you, when New England got down, my wife and we just kind of started cheering for it. We kind of like underdogs, and not that New England would ever be an underdog, but we kind of just started cheering for New England just because they were so down, and Atlanta, everything had gone right for Atlanta in the first half. And I have to say, I mean, that was an amazing comeback. And you can say whatever you want about Tom Brady, but he's a winner. And I don't think there were many other teams. I don't think there were many other quarterbacks in the history of the NFL that could have done what they did. And I just got to say, well done, well played. And it just goes to show you never, ever give up. I don't know. I told my wife, I said, how many times do I have to learn never give up? I mean, we almost turned the channel, and for whatever reason, we kept watching, and it just goes to show you can never give up. I mean, people would have bet hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they probably did at halftime, that they would not come back, and they did. Any
Yeah, it
thoughts?
was. I've been a Patriots fan. I mean, how we're getting on this subject, but for a while, I mean, I used to be a Bears fan when I was a little tiny kid, and then somewhere around when Drew Bledsoe was drafted by the Patriots, I was really into collecting cards, and Bledsoe was the man. And I can remember I turned into a Patriots fan then, and I can remember when he was taken out, or Brady was in there, and Bledsoe got healthy, and I was like, man, put Bledsoe back in, and just over the years, I just become going. I don't know. I love the Patriots, and I love their organization, and I think Tom Brady is a winner, like you said. I think he's the ultimate underdog. I think, and with all the stuff that's gone on over the last couple of years, you just start freaking liking your team even more. And I catch so much crap. It gets to a point where, I sometimes it's like, I didn't even wear Patriots. It's almost like you afraid to say Patriots. And then, of course, living in Arizona, I root for Arizona when the Patriots are playing, but living in Arizona, people are like, how are you a Patriots fan? I'm born and raised here and whatnot. I don't know. It's just blame it on Drew Bledsoe. But, I just started liking them and freaking followed them. And they're the only team that I watch. The only team that I care about. I didn't even play my, junior and senior year in football and in high school. And sophomore year was the last year I played. So, football wasn't even my favorite sport, but it is my favorite sport to watch. I just liked it. It's because of the Patriots. And gosh, man, it was a good game. I can tell you that I was not in a good mood. My phone was almost dead.
I know. I texted you a few times, and you're like, "My phone's gonna go dead," and you were like, "It's not over." And
I just texted you. They need to turn Brady loose because they had some chicken crap game plan going on that wasn't working, and they just needed to let that guy go and let him do his thing. And Atlanta lost that game. They choked. But also the Patriots, did the little things that mattered. And relate that to hunting. You see so many people that, just, they want the fast track. They don't want to grind it out. They don't want to, I just did a predator hunt the other day, and we ended up taking first, me and my team, my partner Mike. And, we've hunted that for years, and not that I'm freaking Patriots, but we've hunted that, I think, 7 years in a row now. We've never not placed in the top 5. And a lot of people don't know that unless they're around us. And, we don't talk crap, and we're not the one that initiates side bets and everything. And this year is the first full year I had a full Saturday to hunt, and we actually didn't do our best, and we ended up winning it. And we only called in 10 predators, but we killed everything we did, and it was a grind. And at the end of the day, we were both like, we didn't even feel like we did that good. But hunting's a grind, and just like going from that game, I think a lot of people just forget that. They want it quick and want it easy. And I always tell hunters when it's going bad, because some of them haven't been there or don't understand, or, it's a grind, and you never know when you're going to glass up that big bull, or, calling a freaking lion, or, you just got to keep grinding at it and believing all the way till the very end, and I think that's the moral to the story. Whether you like the Patriots or you don't like the Patriots, is don't give up, man.
Yeah, never give up. I have to say, I heard an interview with the coach of Atlanta. I don't even know his name. That's how little I pay attention to it. I thought he had a real classy response. I thought he handled it very, very well. I don't know if you saw the interview, but I have to say, I know nothing about the Atlanta organization other than Arthur Blank, the owner, the Home Depot guy. He had he was very humble. And I thought he stood right in the mic and answered the questions, head on. And I say to him, hats off to him for his response to the loss, because it was theirs to lose, and they did lose it. But I think the Patriots won it. So,
it's both ways, right?
Yeah, I mean, my little nephew,
it's not one or the other.
My little nephew loves the Patriots, and I knew you were getting joy out of it, so it just kind of made me smile. But it made me think of my own stuff that I've got going on and my businesses and different things. It's like, never give up, ever. You fight it out till the end. And you said something that's interesting. Dar and I think a lot of times when we go down to Mexico, we'll do these guided hunts and stuff, and we'll think, we're grinding, shooting a few bucks here and there, and we're thinking, wow, we're not doing that good, and and you just grind it out to the end, and then you get back to the States and you realize, you did pretty good. You think, you don't think, oh, we're killing it. Oh, we're knocking them dead. But you just go out, you compete, you push yourself, and you do the best you can. And if you're sitting there at the time thinking, oh, we're knocking them dead, we're knocking them out of the park, then you're probably going to get soft. If you're out there continually grinding and never giving up, I think, just go, and then let it all stack out at the end of the year. Set all the trophies out on the table and see where you stack up. And, sometimes you do, you give your best, and the success doesn't show. And sometimes you don't give it your best and you win first place. So, I mean, the reality is you just have to push yourself, and I thought it was an inspiring game, and it inspired me to just charge, and fix bayonets and just go after it, because they were down. They were out, and they came back and won it. So that was pretty awesome, I thought, just from a game,
the moral of the
standpoint.
Story is like it always to me, hunting, or it almost always feels like a grind, unless I just get blessed and lucky and we kill something on the first day, or two. But it's not all freaking highlights.
Yeah.
It's not all. So many people will see coyotes stacked up, or they'll see a big bull, or or an antelope, or whatever it may be, and they're like, oh yeah, you're just killing it. And it's like you said, the mental game that goes into it's not all like that. If the camera was on me the entire time, people would be like, who is this dumbass? And why did he do that? You know what I mean? Because there's so many mistakes that I make, or there's so many things that, that happen, or, but that doesn't get exposed. You know what I mean? The truth doesn't, we all, everybody, the audience doesn't want to watch that stuff. They don't want to hear about that stuff. It doesn't get likes. It doesn't get followers. They want to, everybody wants to see the highlights. They want to see the trophy photos, and they want to, do all that. But then when you get into it really, and there is, don't get me wrong, I shouldn't say everybody, because there's a majority of you guys that are listening that know exactly what I'm talking about. It is a grind, and sometimes it's the last day, sometimes it's not any day at all, sometimes you don't win, and it's funny, I was going back to the game, I was ready to send a text or post on Facebook, because I know there's people out there, everybody knows I'm a Patriots fan, that not that I'm popular or anything like that, just everybody that's around me. And I was ready, third quarter, I was done. I was ready to post, Atlanta, great game, because Atlanta was kicking the Patriots' butt. They were winning. There was no excuses. There was no, oh, look at that hold, or man, they should have called more defensive holding penalties, or blah, 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 blah. I was ready to lose, with dignity, I guess, if there is that. And then, it's funny, at the end of the game, that I got my phone, and man, all I got was, the refs handed it to him, all the flags, and here's my response. And you can take it for what you want, we can move on, but winners win and losers complain. And I'm not saying you always have to win to be a winner, but you always have to have that winning mentality, because when winners lose, they shut their mouth, move forward. And that's just how I take it. You know?
I mean, when winners lose, they get their mouthpiece knocked out, and they brush their mouthpiece off on their shirt. They put their mouthpiece back in, and they get up, brush themselves off, and go back and get in the huddle. That's what they do. Let's move on. But I did want to say that catch by Edelman. And by the way, if he isn't the ultimate underdog, this little white guy, this little white guy that's running around the field and he's catching balls, that if that wasn't the most unbelievable catch I've ever seen.
Just so people know, there are two main wideouts, Edelman and Hogan. Hogan was a lacrosse player, and Edelman was a college quarterback. So just to put it in perspective what they're playing with. I mean, it's just
was
all
that catch
effort.
Unbelievable? Was that the concentration on that catch to bobble that ball with, the arm in the other players? I mean, it was amazing. It was an amazing.
It was just
catch.
It was just all effort. Most people would have just, most wideouts would have just gave up. It's just all effort. And, there's only a handful of people that would have put in that effort, and that guy's one of them. I mean, it takes a team to win a team sport, So, anyway.
Congrats to you,
better
buddy.
Move on.
Yeah, let's, the reason I wanted to talk to you today is I wanted to break down Unit 10 in Arizona on the elk, and then at the end we'll talk a little bit about antelope in general in Arizona. But I wanted to break down Unit 10, and Unit 10, actually I had a tag. The last elk tag I had in Arizona was in 2005 in Unit 10, and I've spent a couple other hunts in there since then, but I feel like I know Unit 10 very, very well. I spent 30 days in there in 2001, 30 days in there in 2003, about 25 days in there in 2005, and a handful of other hunts since then. And it's a unit that, to me, is very dear to me because I've had some great experiences up there. And I wanted to talk to you because you live in Kingman, Arizona, and it's a unit that you have spent an unbelievable amount of time, whether it's, archery, deer hunting, elk hunting, antelope hunting, predator hunting. I mean, Unit 10 very, very well, and you and your guys at Exclusive Pursuit Outfitters guide in Unit 10. So I thought you would be the perfect guy to talk to about that. I want to get we're going to go through the hunts, but first and foremost, I wanted to talk to you about the September 15th through the 28th archery dates this year, with the full moon, the dark moon being on the 20th of September. Last year, the archery hunt started on the 9th of September, and that's just, in my mind, early for really good bugling. I think these dates of the 15th to the 28th, and with the moon being dark, I think it's going to be phenomenal timing to have those archery dates. I wanted to get your take on that.
Yeah, no, the archery dates, the 15th to the 28th, I mean, they're definitely better dates, in my opinion. Obviously the elk, how healthy they are, bull to cow ratio determines the timing of the rut. The fatter the cows are, it's been proven that there is data out there. The fatter the cow elk are, the better and more consistent timing they're going to cycle. So you're going to get a better rut activity, and obviously. The later, around that equinox is typically when, the rut is more in full swing. It seems like the rut is just diminished and gotten later year after year, but, I don't know. It goes back to that, what we were just talking about. You get in and you hunt the archery elk hunt, and, pretty soon you kind of become disaware of or you start trying to compare years past, and it's definitely none of the units in Arizona I think are what they were back in the 2005 era, especially Unit 10. Unit 10 obviously has great genetics. The age class has been affected. The bull to cow ratio has been affected.
Been affected by what?
It's been affected by too many bull elk tags.
Okay.
So they've killed too many bulls out of there, and so the overall herd size is great, but now we have a situation where it's like a 28 to 30 bulls to every 100 cows, where it's supposed to be 40 plus. So this year, not only are the dates in prime time, it's the lowest tag numbers we've seen in Unit 10 on most of the hunts, and specifically the archery hunt, that we've seen in some years. Since I'm on Go Hunt Insiders deal, and on their unit profile, and 2012 was the first year that they put in 200 tags. And if you guys don't know this, there's 100 tags only this year in Unit 10, as well as now there is no early archery cow elk hunt. So the pressure is going to be as low as it's been in years. So
Craig, you have that pulled up in front of you, and you're saying in 2012 it was 200, and if I don't have that portion of it pulled up in front of me, but I believe it went 200, and then it went 150, 150, and now we're down to 100. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so, but they also had some cow tags running simultaneously. So what you're saying is, and I'm looking at the regs too, the archery hunt is September 15th to the 28th, and there's only 100 bull tags. There's no cow tags at that time frame. So from a pressure situation compared to the last, say, 4, 5, 6 years, the pressure is going to be way less during that 14 days than it's been in a long, long time. I can remember in 05 when I drew, I think there was only 100 tags back then, and I don't believe there was any cow tags. If there was very few, maybe 20 or 25. So you're saying from a people standpoint and interactions with other hunters and pressure on the animals, this is going to be about as good as you've seen it in a long, long time?
Absolutely. It's just the tag numbers. And also no cow hunters, because the elk they don't know they don't care if it's a bull or cow hunter. When you're getting in there, usually the cow hunters can be worse because they're hunting the better bulls with the cows, so you're getting a lot of pressure. And so Unit 10, as far as that goes, is going to be as good as it's been in a long time. I hope it continues. I had a good discussion with Noah, the wildlife officer, actually at the SDI show. And he's like, how do you like it? And their biggest thing for reducing the tags was the bull to cow ratio.
I noticed that they've also pumped up the late cow hunts. I think there's 750 cow tags October 20th through the 26th, and then there's 800 cow tags that's December 8th through the 17th. So it sounds like they're trying to diminish the harvest on the bulls and increase the harvest on the cows to make up for that.
Yeah, they're definitely going to increase them a little bit. I know he said they didn't want to increase it too much, but they definitely, by adding those in there, anytime they pump up a bunch of tags like that, it's going to decrease its success rate, though. So they, because it's just more hunters in there. They're going to get an increased volume of hunters, so that overall they might take more, but the success rate's going to go down. Most of the time.
They may kill more animals, but the success rate per the amount of hunters in the field, talking about the cow hunts, is going to go down.
Yes.
And my thing in Unit 10 is they had 500 late bull hunts on the rifle hunt for many years, and they've dropped it down to 400 this year. So they've dropped it. I think they've been shooting too many late bulls. But I think the thing that might have taken the quality right off the top was for years they were running 20 to 25 early rifle tags, and then they put the number at
100.
100 for a few years during the early rifle hunt. So when you have, 80 and 90% success rates shooting 80 and 90 bulls with a rifle during the rut when they're bugling and at their most vulnerable stage, you're going to just suck the top end bulls, the upper age class bulls, right off the top.
Yeah, I mean, it's those early rifle hunts. They're depending on what 2010. I'm looking at this on Go Hunt Insider. In 2010, they had 50 tags, and that's right before they started ramping them up even more. And in 2010, they had 90% success rate. So they had what
bulls.
45 bulls taken, and in 2011 it dropped down to 82%, and then there was a pretty big downswing. In 2014 it was 69, 2015 it was 73%.
They raised it. That was when they raised it up to 100.
They raised the tags, yeah. So you're increasing, yeah. Your percentage is going down because now depending on who draws, you got on those early rifle hunts, guys are being a majority of people are being selective, and so they may or may not see what they want to shoot. But on the same token, you're adding more permits, so that's why that percentage is going down because it's more pressure. The animals are going to seclude themselves even more, and man, they're just knocking the top end out. And this year it's down to 40. Last year, I believe it was 40 as well. I would like to see that number 20. That's just myself. I think, they're heading in the right direction. They've got to get back to managing that as an alternative management unit, like their basically their long-term 5-year or whatever strategy says, because it's an awesome unit. Half of that unit is the Big Bow Ranch, and then you got Kaibab National Forest, and then you have the Sevens Ranch, which is subdivided, and then you have Babbitt's, and then you have a group of intermixed private ranches on the northeast side. But a big portion of that's the Big Bow, and then the National Forest.
And Craig, let me stop you here for just a second and break down a little bit of the geography of Unit 10, which you already did in saying that it does have private land holdings, some of which are completely private and the public cannot access. And then the biggest ranch of all is the Big Bow Ranch, and you can go to huntbigbowranch.com and see all the ranch rules, but they have allowed public to hunt, and I believe you have to pay an $80 permit fee to go hunt, and you have full access of the ranch, but there are some ranch rules. There is also some forest on the south end, but geographically it's kind of a triangle shaped unit, with the most broad from east to west section of the unit is on the south end, and as you go to the north it kind of goes into a tip of a triangle, if you will, and it borders up there on the north. It borders kind of the up there by the Supai Reservation. All along that west side is the Wallapai Reservation. But correct me if I'm wrong, the borders of Unit 10, I believe, are Route 66 that basically run kind of along that Seligman, on that Crookton exit there north of I-40. And then it runs all the way up kind of on that highway from Williams up to Valley, and then everything west of that over to the Wallapai Reservation. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it.
And Unit 10 in general is a big unit. It's one of Arizona's biggest units. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think it's actually the biggest. But yeah. It's a giant unit. It's there's big open flats to basically pinyon juniper country. there's a lot of glassing points in it compared to Unit 9,
Yeah, and
which
I
is a little
think
different.
I get questions all the time, people saying, well, should I put in for 9 or 10? And while we're here, I think we ought to discuss it a little bit. I think you hit the nail on the head. Unit 10 is configured mostly down in the southeast portion of the unit in the Kaibab National Forest. There are some pine trees, kind of in that Ashfork Williams kind of corner. There are some pine trees, but I would say 95% of the unit is pinyon juniper country into open flats and plains. But what Unit 10 is notorious for, and one of the reasons I've liked it so much and you know put in for my tag there in 2005 is there's a ton of little like malapai rock knobs that you can get up on throughout the whole unit where you can actually get really good vantage. Whereas in Unit 9, you have way less, you still have a few knobs and a few high points to get up to get good vantage and glass from. But Unit 10 is one of the best glassing units, I think, in all of our elk units or antelope units in the state. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think in Unit 9, the difference is, too, is those glassing points are usually pretty crowded. And so it's in Unit 10, may or may not be. The elk are dispersed, kind of unevenly all over. So really, scouting is critical because it changes from year to year. They may be 5-10 miles different herds from where they were the previous year, depending on rainfall and stuff. And the glassing points, it just gives you a lot more to choose from. Whereas in Unit 9, in my opinion, a lot of big bulls are taken off water, especially with trail cameras today. And there's a ton of trail cameras. And then in Unit 9, if you have a good rut, it can be an awesome hunt. But if the rut is poor, it can be a very, very frustrating hunt. Is that your opinion?
For us guides and guys that have hunted Unit 9 and 10 a lot, our best chance of finding a big bull, of killing a big bull, is to find it first. And so Dara and I have always relied on our eyes. So typically wherever we're at hunting elk, we want to go someplace where we can glass. And if we can put our eyes on a bull and find a bull, then we can go in and try and pursue that bull. Whereas a lot of country, a lot of units, and honestly a lot of states across the West, if you're talking thick ponderosa pines, and you're just basically chasing bugles, while that can be a fun way to elk hunt, and it's a way that is a lot of people, that's their only way to do it. We feel like if you're trying to find a big bull, you got to be able to put your eyes on them because your level of efficiency goes way up if you can get up on high points and be able to glass and see them, rather than it becomes a numbers game of chasing them in the brush, chasing them in the pines, chasing them in the junipers, and you're just chasing bugles. Well, you may be only able to look at 5 or 6 bulls, because of them calling, them bugling. You're subject to them. If they're not bugling well, it's harder to get on bulls, where if you can get up on a high knob, you could see 15 or 20 or 25 bulls or more from one high point and move much more efficiently throughout your hunt by just trying to find the bull first. Then once you find it, then figure out how to kill it.
Yeah.
So, I think that's why a lot of people really like Unit 10. I know it's why I like Unit 10 is because it does have thick areas of pinyon juniper, but when you get elevated 3, 4, 5, 6, 700 feet up in the air, you can then look down into those juniper pockets and see a lot of elk and see a lot of bulls, and it sharpens your curve up a little bit as far as, okay, there's a big one, let's isolate and let's try and focus on that bull. Whereas
that's why that late hunt is so good too, compared to a lot of other units.
The only thing I would say, and I'm curious about your thoughts on the Unit 10 late hunt. They dropped it to 400 tags, and of course they have some late archery tags. They have 35 bull tags, 25 cow tags. They have a muzzleloader elk hunt this year, 75 tags, November 10th through the 16th. The only thing I would say about the late hunt in Unit 10 is, yes, you can get up high in glass, but sometimes it's a challenge because you're up on these cone knobs and you can see the bull, but he's a mile and a half out in the flats. And once you get down level with that bull and he's not bugling, which they're very rarely bugling on the late hunt, they become hard to kill. Whereas a unit like 27 or 23 or 22 for a late hunt, so to speak, where you have good glassing, but you're also glassing across canyons where you don't have to move very far to get into position to shoot that animal. In Unit 10, I think one of the hard parts is, yeah, you can see them a lot of times right at first light or last light coming out into an opening, but being able to get down on that flat level with them in the pinyon juniper and get them killed sometimes can be tough.
Yeah, it absolutely, I mean, it can. The other thing about the late rifle hunt is they did move it. It's not around Thanksgiving. It's after Thanksgiving, which is different. I don't know if a lot of people saw that.
December 1st start date, 1st through the 7th.
December 1st. And going back to the muzzleloader hunt, that muzzleloader hunt has been, you can catch, it seems like, those 3.5 to 5.5-year-old bulls. Some of them will still be trying to catch that last cow cycling that missed for the third time, that maybe didn't cycle right, or didn't get bred in late September or early October. Sometimes they'll come in again, or I've noticed that over the last couple of years, so you'll actually see a little bit of bugling action. I think on both those hunts, on the muzzleloader and the late rifle hunt, you hear a lot of people talking about 350, 350, 350. In reality, a 350 is a tank of a bull on those hunts. It's a great bull on the archery hunt nowadays, but it's a tank of a bull on those hunts. And, I mean, obviously, I know for us, we love to try to hit that 350 mark. That's like, I mean, that to me is when you start getting into those bigger bulls. When you hold a 350, it's a big bull. But a 300 to a 340 is still it's a quality animal for those hunts. I mean, by the time you take account breakage, which we had a lot of last year, bulls that have been shot, the time of year, on the muzzleloader hunt, you're limited, to the weapon of what it can do. Don't be expecting, although there is a few, 360 plus bulls that are taken every year, that's not the norm, and it doesn't happen every year,
Let's talk about that. You're talking about hunters' expectations, and, I talk to hunters every day, get emails from hunters every day, as do you. And these guys have been waiting, 15, 18, 20, 22 years to draw their Arizona elk tag. And they've been reading and watching all the content that's been coming out for the last, 15 to 20 years. And, they're taking information from back in 2005 and 3 and 4 and, the overall quality has declined, and so it's hard for these guys that have had 18, 19, 20, 22 points to really get it in their head that, yes, you've waited this long, yes, you've seen, great bulls get killed over the years, and there still is opportunity to shoot great bulls, but right now, Arizona elk quality is not what it used to be. And even though I've said it on a bunch of podcasts already, I've talked to everybody I can, there's still the guys that have 8. It seems like the 17 points and more guys, they can't seem to get it in their head that they feel like, well, I've put in for 20 years, so I deserve a 380 bull. Well, that may be true. The reality is you've just put in for 18 or 20 years and you deserve a tag because you've been waiting, but that doesn't have anything to do with the quality of bull that you should get because of the amount of points you have. Does that make sense to you? I mean, it's
I mean, it's the truth. And I mean, it goes for Unit 9 as well, I mean, I hunted there 2 years ago, and the biggest bull I saw was 370 to 375 in, 20-something days of hunting and scouting. And, I mean, and that's 350 is a big bull, especially for people that haven't killed one. And I'm not trying to lower everybody's, or take the wind out of everybody's sails, but, it's the truth. And, a 370 bull is a lot harder to kill than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And, and also, there is more outfitters. The DIY hunters are more proficient, so a lot of these bulls, I mean, there's the
they don't
technology.
Stand a chance.
I mean, we're affecting the overall quality, and so it's harder. It's more competitive on public land. It's pretty crazy. The gap is closing between, everybody as hunters because all the information's out there, and, we get technology so much faster, and a lot more guys are glassing, and learning and becoming better hunters. And it's just tougher. I mean, I'm not making excuses. I'm just saying.
Well, I think with the harder, mapping programs, people getting better at hunting, and
Google Earth.
There's more roads out there. There's more ways to get around. Google Earth. I mean, people are just flat out getting better, and using tactics to kill these bulls that the elk are getting where they don't stand as much of a chance. And so but then you get that hunters are doing better, but you also throw in the amount of tags that they've been pressuring a lot of these units across the state of Arizona. The age class is going to flat come down. So we've covered that pretty well. I want to ask you specifically the archery hunt. We've already talked about great dates. We've talked about only 100 tags. You feel like from a quality of hunt standpoint, that could be as good as that archery hunt's been in a long time from strictly a quality of hunt, not talking about size of bull, but quality of hunt, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, freaking 100 tags, no other cow hunters, I mean.
And then the early rifle hunt, September 29th through October 5th, my idea on those dates are the elk will probably be screaming their guts out. I'm betting that the rut will probably be pretty intense because of, good moisture. The cows, fat and sassy. I'm worried a little bit about broken antlers on the early rifle hunt. I'm curious what your thought is on that.
I think, okay, we're going to get into some rainfall stuff, and I agree with you. I think it's going to be as good as it can be as far as the peak of the rut. They're going to be hopefully bugling as good as they, possibly will. There's 40 tags, so, I think that's 20 more than I personally would like it if I had the tag. But I mean, it's still going to be awesome. It depends on what archery hunters draw, where they hunt, how many bulls they, are successful out, how good the rut is early, because if the rut's good early, or if we get, with a big bow, you can't sit water, but on some of the other places, a lot of guys sit water. If it's dry, that can be an effective tactic. But if the rut's strong during the archery hunt, you're probably going to have some of the bigger bulls that are taken. Not that there's not any left over. Going back to breakage, last year, my opinion, last year breakage was horrible on that hunt. A lot of bulls broke that second week of the archery elk hunt. And we're talking beams and, multiple tines. And it just seemed like every bull that I looked at that was over 350 was broke.
Why do they break? They tend to break in Unit 10, and they always have broken up pretty good. Why do you think that is?
I think the antlers were a little bit less dense, and I think maybe some cows all popped in at the same time. We had a real sporadic monsoon, so I think a lot of the elk were congregated around some of the water sources and feed. You would go. It was weird because 1 mile would be as green as you've ever seen it, that 1 mile stretch, but then the 10 or let's say 5 miles around that area would be as dry as you ever seen it. So I think the elk were really congregated, and I think when those cows did come in, those bulls fought, and as well as I do, it like happens one night or 2 nights, and it's like, holy crap, So I think the antler growth was subpar. I don't think it was horrible. It's just my opinion, but I think it was a little bit subpar. We had a pretty good January. February was bone dry. Most of March was bone dry. And then we tried to play catch up in April and May of last year with a little bit of precipitation. But right now, those bigger bulls are starting to drop. And they'll drop through mid-March, the bigger bulls typically. And so, that green feed from February to the beginning of April is critical. And yeah, we got showers in April, but
you're talking about last season.
I'm talking about last season. So that period from February to, the beginning of April was pretty dry. It was actually really dry. And this year's a little bit different. I've got some data here, that I've looked up, and I'm not freaking pumping Go Hunt Insider. I'm not, because they sponsor the podcast or whatever. I'm not affiliated with Go Hunt or Go Hunt Insider at all, other than I'm a member. And they've got a lot of good, quick information. They've got a historical precipitation chart, which, they could add some more stuff to it, but it's a great, good, quick resource. And I'm looking at, when I'm on the phone with clients, I use their draw odds now, and I have all their applications, their harvest success. It's good stuff if you haven't been on there. But I'm looking at some other data. We've had December and January have been extremely wet in Arizona this year. Extremely. Last year, we did not have a wet December. It was fairly dry. And this year, in Unit 10, according to Go Hunt, we've had 2.7 inches of precipitation in December, and we don't have the data out for January yet because it just finished up on Go Hunt's deal. But the previous December, so December of 2015, we didn't even get an inch of overall precipitation in Unit 10. So there's basically 2 inches difference. Plus, right now I'm pulling up the data for from the state climate office, and it's showing from December 7th through February 4th. Much of Arizona is northern Arizona. The elk units are from 150 to 400% of their average precipitation for that time period. So that means they're 50 to 300% above what the average is. Unit 10 is running in the 150 to 400. There's a good swath that's in that 150 to 200 in the middle section. And then on the western and eastern side, it's 200 to 400%.
Okay, tell me how does that relate to elk antlers that are being dropped and that will be growing here soon, and how does that translate from your experience? How does that translate in looking forward into this 2017 season?
Okay, bottom line is the ground is going to be super saturated. We did get snow with this. We have had a few days of warm up. So basically the ground is super saturated. You can't even get around in some of these areas over the last few weeks because the ground, it's just freaking boggy and wet. So what that equates to for guys that are listening it equates to, if it warms up in February here, which it's going to, we're going to have, that feed's going to start coming up, the browse is going to be good, and even if we get a subpar February, and if we get just an average March, I think it's going to be an average to above average antler growth year, because we're going to have the nutrients for those animals from the feed, from the moisture. Does that make sense?
Explain to me why it's important for elk to drop their antlers and for the ground to be wet and for it to kind of be a warmer February and warmer March. Explain to me why green feed is important in an elk's nutrition, creating antlers.
Those bulls are recovering. They need the more green or highly, I don't know how to use the terminology. It doesn't sound like a dumbass, but the more nutrient-filled feed that they can get from the browse, cliff rows, from any of the green up, as far as any of the, spring grass that comes up, the earlier the better. Because, I mean, it's just like lifting weights for us. If you lift weights or you train and you're on a good diet, you're going to get better results than if you're eating Twinkies. And I've
always been taught that if the elk are fleshy and their bodies are in good condition, and this goes for elk, deer, all of the ungulates, if they're fleshy and their body is in good position, then they can pour on the necessity into their antlers because their bodies are in good condition. If their bodies are in poor condition, they can't pour it into their antlers until their body gets in good condition. In other words, if they're feeling good, if they're fleshy, if they're getting all of the nutrition that they need, then they'll grow good antlers. If they have to struggle and paw through the snow and it's super cold and their bodies are poor, they're going to grow smaller antlers.
Absolutely. And that's, one of the things where Arizona has that advantage. And other than like the White Mountains and some of the rim country, we do have some areas that have a lot of snow. But if February warms up, Unit 10 had snow, but it's kind of higher, more. It's kind of lower elevation country, 5,500 foot to 6,500 foot, versus some of the other units that may be a 7,000 foot. So it doesn't have the snow pack. It doesn't have the impacts of, per se, like a Unit 1 that could be under 40 inches of snow for a while. But that warm up's going to help Unit 1, because February looks like it's going to be pretty warm. So that's going to melt off that snow fairly quickly, and the ground's been already pre-saturated because December was already wet. We were having a hard time in our early January deer hunts getting around before we got some of the big storms in late January. So those elk are going to be fat. Like you said, the nutrition's going to go to their antlers. It's the same theory as why high fence people or people that are hunting whitetail, why they want good nutrition for those animals, because the more nutrient filled feed and the better shape they are going into those antler growth periods, the bigger antlers that they're going to have for their genetic structure. So they're basically going to hopefully max out their potential, versus on a poor antler growth year where you don't have those nutrients, they don't have those fat reserves, they're going to go into basically some sort of, basically like starvation mode, to where those nutrients don't go to those antlers, they go to their body in survival. So
good stuff. Craig, I want to take a quick break here, and I want to talk about the three sponsors of my podcast. And GoHunt.com Insider is the title sponsor of the podcast. And you just were talking about, you were a big skeptic of GoHunt.com Insider when it first came out. And I've talked to you over the years, and now I hear you saying that you're using it when you're talking to your hunters. You're using it as a resource. And obviously they sponsor my podcast. I will tell you that last month of January was the highest month that I've had as far as J Scott Outdoors podcast users using the J Scott promo code with Go Hunt Insider for signups. And Lorenzo and his crew, Chris Porter and Brady Miller and the whole crew at Go Hunt, they keep me posted on the amount of signups that people use the J Scott promo code. With that promo code, you get a $50 KUIU gift card immediately sent to you electronically from Go Hunt Insider when you sign up for a membership. But I would agree with you, and I have gotten a lot of feedback from some of my buddies, including yourself, that when Go Hunt Insider first came out, you yourself were extremely skeptical about that. But I have been hearing how the tide has been changing over this last season, in the last couple months, with all of the new draw odds and some of the statistical data on the Insider. And I just heard you say that you use it all the time. To me, that makes me smile, knowing that I knew Go Hunt Insider and some of the things that they have coming in the future that I know about. It's a phenomenal resource. So I just want to thank Go Hunt Insider for their sponsorship of this podcast. I want to encourage the listeners to use it when they're putting in for all of these western states. With New Mexico coming up, they are going to have all the exact data for the non-resident odds for all the different hunts, which nobody's really ever done before, and be able to break down each hunt. But I know what Go Hunt Insider is doing is working. So I want to encourage you guys to go check it out. Use the J Scott promo code. Get a $50 KUIU gift card. Who doesn't like having more KUIU? And also phonescope.com. Cheston Davis and his crew, they've gotten into Walmart. They've gotten into Sportsman's Warehouse. I saw Cheston at the SCI convention, and phonescope.com is just doing phenomenal. Their sales are unbelievable. They make digiscoping adapters, so they adapt spotting scopes and binoculars to the phone. And any phone, they pride themselves on any phone, any optic, they can combine the two, so you can take photos and videos of your hunts and of these animals. Use the JScott16 promo code and get a 10% discount. And I'd also like to thank the Outdoorsmans. You can go on outdoorsmans.com or call 1-800-291-8065. Outdoorsmans is the optics authority. And Cody Nelson and his crew, we just did a live podcast, Dar and I did, from SCI with Cody and his crew, and they had just a bang-up session there at SCI, and I believe had a record turnout of sales there at SCI, and they are the optics authority. And if you use the J Scott promo code, either when you go into the shop, when you call on the telephone, or on outdoorsmans.com, you get a 10% off on those products. And I want to thank those sponsors for sponsoring my podcast. Craig, I want to talk to you real fast about Unit 10. As far as we've talked about, moisture, we've talked about antler growth, we've talked about some of the different hunts in Unit 10, we've talked about public versus private, but I wanted to point something out. You and your group at Exclusive Pursuit Outfitters, you have private land opportunities in Unit 10, and I wanted to give you a chance to talk a little bit about the hunting on the private land versus the hunting on the public. I can only tell you what the public land hunting is. You can tell us what the private land opportunities are. For me, one of the things that I see as a benefit, and over the years when I've hunted in Unit 10 and looked across the fence, it seems as the pressure mounts, the elk congregate on private, even though the hunting on the public access areas, even on the Big Boquillas, even on the forest, or what have you can still be phenomenal. Some of these private land holdings that are totally private, I have seen it firsthand where these elk pile in and congregate on these private areas. During the rut, to me, it seems like, just a bugling frenzy with just a few hunters. And then that's one positive that I see. And then I also see some benefit to some of these late hunts, even like the muzzy hunt, the late archery, where you have the ability to hunt some of these elk and be, one or two or three of the only people chasing these elk on the private land, where you take the same amount, hunting them out on the quote unquote public, and the the interaction with people is obviously greater. What's your thoughts on your private land leases that you have?
Hunting public versus private. I've guided on private. I've guided on public. I've only hunted for myself on public, and the biggest difference is, I heard Chris Denham say it one time, is it's you against the animal versus you against the animal and four other guys. If you have the opportunity to hunt on private, it's one of those things where you kind of gotta weigh your options and what you can afford and what you want out of a hunt. But that's the biggest difference, as far as quality on private versus public. Where we're at, it's pretty much the same, as far as quality of size. Top end's the same, depending from year to year. I mean, one year it may be 380, the next year it may be 415, but the advantage really comes into play. It's you can leave a bull, you can leave whatever, and come back to it, and more than likely than not, you can hunt that bull systematically, versus when you're hunting on public, you always have that in the back of your mind. You got a big bull found or whatever, and you're like, man, we gotta beat somebody in there, or we hope they didn't bump them, or you come back and you can't find them. Well, what you didn't know is somebody walked through there, bugling and bumped all the elk, or, you know what I mean? So that's the biggest advantage. It's still hunting. The elk are, it's not like they're tame elk or anything. I mean, that you still have to be skillful. You still have to take all the general principles that make you successful on public land and transform it over on the private land. But the biggest advantage is just the pressure and the ability to kind of relax and go, okay, I got a big bull found. We're going to hunt him. And, more than likely than not, unless he leaves or breaks or something like that, that we're going to get our opportunities if we play our cards right. Versus on public, as well as I do, man, you got to get a little lucky, or a lot lucky. And then based on where everybody is hunting or who's there, I mean, you're not hunting. It's not true hunting where you're hunting you against the animal. You're, especially with the tag numbers that we've seen, it's really you hunting against other people. As well as
management, yeah.
It is, and that's a tough thing to swallow when you waited a long time. I go back to people, the Utah hunt that I had in 2013, and I was only non-resident to draw on the Monroe that year, and then there was like 6 or 7 other people, and I kept looking, asking my dad, and I kept checking my GPS, and I kept checking the maps, like, am I in the right unit? Because literally, I had no competition, or minimal. I didn't see anybody, and as well as I do, whenever you get in those situations, that's kind of how it used to be, in Unit 10 all over 15, 20 years ago when there was low tag numbers, and even in Unit 9, but everywhere, it seems like there's people everywhere nowadays. You're holding your breath when you find something. I mean, to the point of it, you almost cannot find anything that's a secret anymore, or it's secret for very long, because information, word of mouth, and it seems like the stakes have just gotten raised so high that there's just literally people everywhere. And so I can tell you from my standpoint, that is the biggest difference between hunting private versus public. Is it's not the fact of, oh, there's giants over there and blah, 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 blah. It's the pressure, and it's to be able to actually use your own skills and systematically go at an animal versus worrying about what everybody else is doing. And that's the key. And, we all dream of those public land hunts where there's nobody, and you know what I mean? And there's, you pinch yourself. You're like, how come there's nobody here? And, it just doesn't seem like that happens very often anymore. There's always seems like you're holding your breath and there's somebody. And, I had that happen with my wife this year, and and we should have killed a big bull on a late hunt, and pretty soon the troops come in and that bull's nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
I mean, he went dark on us and moved country, and it was all because we were playing a systematic game with him, and I was really mindful of where I glassed from and how I approached it, and not to go in this area because I knew he'd come out over here, but other people weren't. They just went and walked through the crap, and spread their scent, and I can't control that on public, you know what I mean? And it is what it is, I am a public land guy, but on the same token, the more I hunt, the more I see the frustrations of it. But I know that's the game on public land, and a lot of people don't say that. They don't realize how lucky you have to be, on public land and versus private land. I think there's a lot more, you can control the game a lot more with your skill than you can on public land. You can't control the game as much.
I think it comes down to value. I think it comes down to if you value less people and you value having an opportunity to hunt an elk and maybe leave it, and you're trophy hunting and you're looking for a certain bull, you can leave a bull knowing that you can come back and probably he's not going to be pressured, so he's going to be right there. You can hunt for 3 or 4 or 5 days and come back and maybe harvest that bull looking for a better bull. And sometimes those opportunities on public aren't that way. One of the challenges when you're hunting public is you come back, you've hunted 3 or 4 days, you come back to hunt that bull that you passed on the first or second day. You don't know if it's in the back of a pickup on the way back to Ohio or not. I mean, you really don't know. I think that's the value proposition. Yeah, and you rush it and you end up shooting something because your fellow hunter is probably going to shoot that bull the first opportunity they get. So I think that's the value proposition of private land. And love it or hate it, that's a discussion for a whole nother day. But it is what it is, and I think there's some serious value. I've hunted public and private for a long, long time, and the value of private is having the ability to have less people around you, and that's basically what it comes down to.
Yep, absolutely.
I want to finish our discussion on elk in Unit 10 with this, and then I want to move quickly into antelope and get some thoughts from you on antelope. But in Unit 10, to me, people ask me to compare Unit 10 and Unit 9. In general, Unit 10 seem to have longer main beams and seem to have bigger back ends, but they seem to have thinner antlers, and their antlers seem to be lighter colored, a lot lighter colored than Unit 9. And I think that's a lot to do with the pinyon juniper country that they live in. But Unit 10 is known for big back ends. Unit 9 is known for heavier bulls. I just want to get your take on antler configuration, general themes of your ideas of what separates Unit 10 from 9 as far as differences.
It seems like and I know there's been some big non-typicals killed out of 10, but it seems like Unit 9 always has a few of those just big, gnarly non-typicals. Seems like Unit 10 has less of those. Like you said, they generally, you can get some wider bulls in Unit 10 with some bigger back ends, kind of that same. They're usually a lot lighter color, unless you're over by the Williams area. Their horns
That's
are
because of the
usually,
pine trees, right?
yeah, the pines, the pinyon pines up there in the ponderosas. But yeah, that's basically the difference. Unit 10, I mean, Arizona used to have this reputation for little thirds, but it seems like I don't see that as much anymore. As far as, littler thirds. I don't, maybe it's just me and where I've been hunting, but seems like we've been getting, a lot of bulls with that, 13, 14, 15 up to, 18-inch thirds, whereas it used to have a reputation of, it seemed like, of having, those 8-inch thirds, that always seem to kill a big old bull. But on a good antler growth year, like hopefully we're going to have this year, it can produce some of those giant back ends that we all love. Not that Unit 9 can't. Obviously, it produces its own big bulls, but it really seems like. And there's a crossover there. A lot of guys don't understand. There's a big flat on the border of Unit 9 and then the Cataract Canyon. But that big flat, those bulls, and they go back and forth. Some bulls will grow in Unit 9 and some bulls will grow in Unit 10, and they may take a 30-mile hike, before and after that rut. So a bull that's growing in the, southeast side or southwest side of Unit 9 might end up over in Unit 10, and a bull that's over on the east side of 10 or on the central side of 10 might end up in Unit 9.
There is a lot of movement. I think that's one thing that a lot of people don't realize and understand, as we've talked about it before. A lot of trail camera pics of velvet bulls will be in 10 and they'll end up in 9. A lot of velvet bulls that summer in 9 will end up in 10. And I know Lee had killed a big giant bull years ago on one of the private leases that you guys have that, summered the whole time in Unit 9 and ended up getting killed in Unit 10. Or actually, I think that bull was way north in Unit 10 summering and ended up way south in Unit 10 getting killed. So, I mean, those elk can move 15 to 20 miles. One thing I'll point out, and then we'll get on to antelope, is like the late rifle hunt. I'm looking at the Go Hunt Insider and looking at non-residents. The late rifle hunt in Unit 10 last year, 9 points was 100% draw. And if you look at the archery, the late archery statistics, or let's take the muzzleloader, the muzzy hunt in Unit 10 last year was 13 points, was a guarantee on that November 10th through the November 16th season. And if you want to see all the different odds, you can go and become a Go Hunt Insider member. I think Unit 10 is going to have a bang up year this year, but I think the quality is not what everybody expects it to be. If they can keep the tag numbers, and I kind of want to get your closing thoughts on Unit 10. If they can keep the tag numbers low for 3 or 4 years and keep the archery tag numbers at 100 and keep the early rifle numbers at 40, keep the late hunts down in that 300-400 range, I think we could see a spike or a bump in quality in Unit 10 as far as antlers. I think the archery hunt in Unit 10 this year will be pretty darn good from just a people standpoint and quality of hunt. I think there will be some people that put in for Unit 10 that are disappointed that, the top ends are, the 350s, 360s, and they're not the 390, 400s like what they're expecting. I think there will be a couple of big, 390, 400 bulls that probably do get harvested, 1 or 2 maybe. But the general consensus is, a lot of 330 to 340 bulls. And if I was going into the archery hunt in Unit 10, I would be saying, 350 plus is my goal. And if you go in with that mentality and that expectation, I think you could have a fantastic hunt on that 100 tag archery hunt with a, mentality of, if I can kill a 350 plus bull, we're doing great. Your thoughts, Craig, finishing on elk?
I agree 100%. It's going to be a more quality hunt than we've seen, and it's going to take a few years. Do I ever think it's going to be like, the years around 2005 and the late 90s? Possibly not. I don't think, with everything that we have today available, I don't know if we'll ever see that. But it definitely, I'm a big proponent of them keeping those tag numbers down, and I would, it'd be awesome if we can see those late tags come down a little bit more, and see that top end creep back up to that, or that bottom end creep back up to that 360 type mark, and get a few more 380s out there. It's definitely not a menu, and you're going to need to pack a lunch if you want to kill a bull that's over 360. 350 is going to be a great trophy, and that's just the truth of it.
Okay, good stuff. Let's move on to antelope in Arizona, and you know more about antelope than I've ever even thought of. You like those antelope hunts. You do those antelope hunts. You've been around those antelope your whole life. You really enjoy that hunt. You and Lee are guiding the auction tag holder right now, and his tag will expire the 14th of August. So you guys have a vested interest in looking around for antelope across the state. I wanted to go over maybe your top 5 or whatever, some of your top units of antelope, and maybe just talk about, compare and contrast the units a little bit. So give the floor to you.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to sound like a snob, but I love big antelope. Small antelope are cool, but you see them all the time, so you kind of get a little bit numb to them. But if you ever walk up to just a big antelope, 85 plus, especially approaching the 90 inches, I mean, it's like walking up to a big old sheep. It's really cool. It's big old black horns. Some of the units I prefer myself. I prefer some of the units with a little bit lower tag numbers, because I think Unit 10 has the most tags. I think there's 100 in there. And rifle tags. We're talking about rifle now. Unit 10 has the most antelope, and there's a lot of antelope country, but that hunt's another hunt. It's really all the rifle antelope guys that are applying for rifle antelope. The points are really heavily weighted. I mean, I think some guys got 26 points. And it's just, the point creep is just ridiculous. I almost think the antelope or game fish needs to make rifle antelope a once in a lifetime draw. A little bit like sheep in Arizona. That's just my opinion. I'll probably get some hate mail over that one. But when you start getting 26 points with, several people with that number, and there's a lot of people with 20 or more points. And I hear every person saying, man, I've just waited forever, blah, blah. And, I want to kill an 85 or I want to kill a 90. And man, good luck. Don't get me wrong. It's one of those deals where there's a lot of people that don't know antelope, and antelope to me are the toughest animal to field judge. And that's my personal opinion. I think sheep is right there with them, out of the animals that I hunt. And they're extremely hard to field judge. So guys that wait a long time that are going to go on their own, most of the guys don't know what a big antelope is. I've seen it in the past where guys have sent me photos of big bucks, and they've thought they've just been average bucks, and I'm like, that thing is a tank. And vice versa, where they'll send me a photo of a buck and it's an 80-incher and they think it's 88 to 90, Some of the units that I like, I do like Unit 10 just because it has the sheer numbers there. Last year, we had a buck, my hunter, that had our sights on. We didn't get them killed because the hunting competition is high. If I was hunting with my wife or my daughter, I would not ever put them in a situation where it was so competitive. If we had a big buck found and there was multiple people there, I would probably back out and just go hunt, relax. And that's what I end up doing with my hunter is, we didn't back out. The buck was shot out right from underneath us. Those guys got the buck. We lost, and we sucked it up, and we went and hunted, and Cody killed just a nice buck, but he had an awesome time, seen over 70 bucks. You can see a lot of antelope. Killing an antelope is not that hard with a rifle. It's fairly simple. For the most part, the main thing is you're hunting against people, going back to that public, and the antelope are really in the wide open, so it can get very competitive on big bucks. And I almost wish they'd split those into 2 separate weeks in Unit 10, 50 and a 50. And I'll probably get hate mail for that just because I don't like pressure packed hunts like that, especially for guys that have waited, decades. I think it sucks. So I gravitate towards those lower units. I love 18A. I like 18B. I like 19B, 17A. I will tell you all those units have access issues where you're going to have to do your homework. You're going to have to pound the hills. You're going to have to pound the country. You're going to have to scout your butt off because there's little pockets of antelope. There's little areas that you can access by walking in or not walking in. You just have to really do your homework. But I'm not afraid to do that, so that's why I like those units. Unit 9, I think, being the later dates, is a unit that I really like. I think there's 45 Unit 9 tags. Yes, the antelope might be slightly smaller because it's getting antelope sheath off in November in Arizona, so they lose the outer core. So come late September, early October, they're starting to shrink in its small amounts. A big buck and it's all different. A big buck that's 88 inches, he might only be 87 by the time that hunt comes because he's lost a little bit of mass because his horns are drying out. So Unit 9, I like Unit 9. There's 5B North, 5A that are some popular units. I don't hunt those units as much.
What about 7?
7, it's all right. It's never been I like 7 West for elk. That's one of my favorite units for elk. I've just never been a big fan of Unit 7 antelope. I just haven't. I know there's big bucks in there. If I was a guy, I'd look in some of those pockets of trees, pop open Google Earth and look for those little flat areas that are in the trees, because that's where you're going to find a bigger buck away from people. And a lot of those big bucks that get killed in 7 and 8, 6A that live in those little pockets of trees, they're found by guys that find them when they're hunting other species or guides, and then they come back in and they got a buck that they found that nobody else has found. They have it to themselves. Now I say that this podcast will probably make it popular, and everybody will be hunting the trees, and the guys that are out in the flats will have the big buck to themselves. So 7 is not one of my favorite units. I like 9, 10, 18A, 18B, 19B, and 17A and B. 19A is okay. There's a lot of private property. That historically was one of the best units in the world, best genetics. There's some challenges.
What about 8?
I do like Unit 8. There was a big buck killed out of Unit 8 last year. There was a big buck the previous year. I'm talking 88 plus. So I think Unit 8 is kind of a sleeper unit. I think they ramped up the tag numbers in there a little bit. I'll have to look. But I do like Unit 8. Again, there's pockets of trees in there, or pockets of flats in the trees that could hold a big buck that maybe not very many people have found. So those are kind of the units that I like. I think the thing with antelope that a lot of guys, I want to stress this huge, because everybody calls and wants to know where we have a big buck found. Like, where should I apply? Where do you got it? And antelope get big quick, 3.5 to 4.5. They're reaching their potential. But a lot of it comes in speculatory, like a 1.5, 2.5, you might see a buck, and then you make note of him, and then you got to come back and see what did he turn into, at 3.5, 4.5 years old. But a lot of it's just scouting, like that year, because they can get so big so quick, because their average, their longevity isn't like they don't even have the longevity usually of a sheep, where it's like 13, 14 years old, or even 12 years old, 7 to 10 years old. They're pretty damn old.
Okay, so I have a question for you. Why,
yeah.
Because antelope can hit their peak at 3.5 years old, why is that important for hunters to know and understand and realize?
Because a buck that may have just been a 75-inch nothing buck the year before could be 85 this year. Versus, a sheep in that 1 year's time period, or an elk, more than likely, an elk, he may not be till he's 8.5 years old, but he's reaching peak potential. Same for a sheep. Whereas an antelope, he may just be a baby.
And is that also why big antelope can spring up anywhere, because in 3.5 years they could be a giant, and if they slip through the cracks here or there with the right genetics, all of a sudden, very, very quickly, you can have a monster.
Boom. Yes. And that's why it's so important. It's so critical to scout, because, and granted, I've seen bucks stay big all the way until they're 7 or 8, but then they usually start losing like a prong or something like that, so they're not as big as they were when they're 3.5 to 5.5. But it really is that simple. You have to get out and you have to look and you have to pound it, but and hunt the biggest available. If you're looking for the best antelope, let's say you draw, let's say 19B, 18A, it doesn't matter. 5B, it doesn't matter. You go in there and you pound it if you want a big antelope, and you kill the biggest available antelope that you can find, if that's what you're after. But you got to put time in. And that buck, that year it may be 85. The next year it might be 90. The next year it might be 82. So there's a big swing, And I know there's guys that put stats up and whatnot, but that's how I am. I get a client that puts in for, we tend to put clients in for the units that we like the most. It's because we know them best and we feel like we have advantages. Just like I feel like, that's where I apply for units that I have advantages in. So it's all about that advantage. If you know a unit very well, let's say a unit 4A, let's say a guy from Winslow or, whatnot, knows unit 4A, he should apply for unit 4A because it's on his home turf versus applying for a unit across the state. Now, non-resident, that's where your advantage is going with a guide. You're just going to have an advantage. And if you don't, I would suggest, if you don't hire a guide, I would suggest, you get there a week early and just pound the heck out of it for a week and be ready to kill your buck on opening morning. Or if you don't find a buck that, is the type of buck you want to kill, be ready to hunt the whole entire hunt, So I find it, I think a lot of times we take out the home field advantage. And I know non-residents don't have that, and that's where they have to look at, either hiring a guide or coming and put your time in, because you can only get lucky so many times coming from out of state. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Especially on a hunt like that.
Yeah, you can only get lucky so many times. And so for other guys, home court advantage is huge. There's a reason why teams in the NFL play, in the play the regular season to get home field advantage. So if you have the advantages in an area, it like the back of your hand, that might be the best unit for you to apply for antelope. Let's say, because one of the things, guys just aren't hunting antelope a lot in Arizona. There's a lot of guys that they have no idea what a big antelope is. They think a buck with flared out prongs is a giant when it's that big, heavy buck that his horns curl in and he doesn't look that big to the regular. He doesn't look flashy, so to speak. And so, and shoot that flashy buck if that's what you want, but you might be disappointed on his score because he looks a lot bigger than what he really is, because mass is king on antelope. The mass measurements are huge. And if you can get a buck with 7-inch bases or high 6s, he's probably going to be a lot bigger than that buck with, 5 7/8 or 6-inch bases. And a lot of guys just don't have the experience level to see that. So take that home field advantage into play. That's what we do, and that's why we apply our hunters and ourselves for the units that we know better, because we feel like we have that home field advantage, and sometimes that home field advantage is better than going to the best unit per se that somebody deems as the best.
Yeah, for sure.
So you got to scout hard.
That's awesome stuff there. Awesome review there of Unit 10. Awesome review of your take on Arizona antelope. I want to encourage anybody that's out there listening to follow Craig and his guiding staff and partners there at Exclusive Pursuit Outfitters on Instagram. Go to their website, exclusivepursuitoutfitters.com. Follow Craig at Craig Steele AZ on Instagram. Craig, I just appreciate your insight always. You're one of the most requested people that I get on the podcast, and I think that's for a reason, because you speak from the heart and you just let her rip, and I appreciate that. And it was great seeing you up in Vegas at the SCI convention. I want to congratulate you guys for having a great over-the-counter deer success this year, and then all your predator hunts at exclusive Predator Exclusives. You guys, I'm saying Craig Steele Arizona Guide of the Year with the giant elk you guys killed and antelope and all the different things that you and then just go straight into shooting coyotes and bobcats and chasing lions and all the stuff that you do. So I just want to hats off to you. I want to let you go enjoy your Patriots win. I know that for you, that's probably just sitting in a room and smiling, and you're not really one to be calling and razzing your buddies on the phone. But never say never. We can all learn from what the Patriots did yesterday, and so yeah, thanks for being a friend to the podcast. Thanks for being a friend to Dar and I, and I think you're a great ambassador for our sport of hunting and our tradition and our favorite pastime of hunting. And keep up the great work. And look forward to another podcast down the road here.
All right, Jay. Thanks, man.
All right, buddy. Take care. God bless.
All right. Bye-bye.